Neuropsychology sounds like a department in a large provider institution, but it's actually a form of behavioral science. I'm joined today by Henry DeVries. He's the CEO and acquisitions editor at Indie Books International. We talk about how we need to engage the inner caveman brain in order to really motivate purchasing behavior, and how we need to get people to take that next best action. We also get deep into why storytelling is the key to successful marketing. Let's get to it.
Swaay.
Henry, welcome back to the program.
It's so great to be here. And we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, neuropsychology, and how marketing people and people in healthcare B2B can apply this.
Yeah, looking forward to diving deep into that topic with you. But before we go there, Henry, for the benefit of our audience who may be new, can you just give us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I run a company called Indie Books International, and we work with healthcare, health advisors, people who are in the business of advising other businesses about the business of health. That's a mouthful. And then also marketing agencies. So I have a background. I was an agency owner and definitely had healthcare clients. And healthcare advisors started finding us. And we didn't go after the niche. They found us. And when there got to be 30 of them, we said, I think we have a niche here. And people kept mentioning Swaay, and you've got to get involved with Swaay. So we've been very interested in your organization.
Well, thank you for saying that, Henry. And yeah, that's how we met. We had a couple of mutual friends who have, worked with you to produce their books, and that's how we got introduced.
Yeah.
Um, and by the way, for those of you watching this, it turns out that Henry and I have very similar taste in shelving. So when you look at this video, our shelves look like they're blending in the background there. So that's kind
Yeah.
of fun.
That is funny.
All right.
I
Well,
think
Henry, let's
IKEA.
dive
We
in.
both went to IKEA, I'm guessing.
Very
Okay.
clearly, we both like the same
Yeah.
IKEA shelf.
Yeah.
uh, no, but Henry, I'm excited because when I saw this proposal of yours that you made for a speaking session around neuropsychology, I was very intrigued because, first of all, I don't know much about it. And then second of all, I'm interested to hear how it can be applied to B2B or any kind of healthcare marketing for that matter. But maybe first I can start by asking you, Henry, what is neuropsychology?
Neuropsychology is about how the brain is hardwired
Hmm.
and how it processes information, and that there are different parts of the brain. And something I learned along the way is not to bring the full skull model with the brain in it through security at the airport. TSA did not really like to see a skull in my luggage. We had words. But in the brain, there's the old part of the brain. That's sort of that caveman, fire, flee, fight, that kind of brain. And as a caveat, I have to say, I am not a medical authority. I do not have a medical degree. I am but a humble MBA and a humble business journalist who writes for Forbes and the California Business Journal and have written 20 books for myself. So I'm a researcher. So I was researching this and talking to neuropsychologists about it. And they explained that there's an outer or newer part of the brain that's where you think things over. And then there's a core part of the brain is where emotions sit. And their research has proven that people do not make decisions with that newer thinking about numbers part of the brain. If you want somebody to think it over, give them lots of facts and figures. If you want them to make a decision, you need to give them the right story at the right time because that is the shortcut to that behavioral part of the brain where people make decisions.
So what do you mean by the right story, Henry?
Well, what I mean by the right story is also the right time. I've written a series of books about persuade with a story, and I've trained 50 different groups of CEOs on how to persuade with a story. And I tell them that I don't want you telling grandpa stories, and I don't see you like Mark Twain sitting down and talking about the river life, off of Hannibal, Missouri. No, you're not that person. You're having a conversation, and I'll give a quick demo. You're having a conversation with a prospect, and you ask them what their goals are, and you listen, active listening. Then you ask them what their assets are in this area, or what have they tried, what's worked, something positive, and they share. And then you ask them what their roadblocks are, and then you shut up because they're experts on their roadblocks. They'll tell you what their roadblocks are. And then when you hear those roadblocks, that's where I want your supercomputer that's in your head to go, well, that story is like the Penny Reed story. So then you can say, oh, may I tell you a quick story about someone who was in your same situation who wanted to want to go, and her name was Penny Reed? And everybody says yes. And then in 2 minutes, not 15 minutes, uh, not 15, 2 minutes, you tell them an arc of a story of how this character that you helped went from mess to success. And that is very persuasive to people that they say, oh, well, this person knows what they're talking about. This person is just not a theoretical person. They actually have been in the arena, so to speak, to paraphrase President Teddy Roosevelt. So that's what tells them that you know how to take someone from here to there, from mess to success, from problem to solution.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you for clarifying that, Henry. So to go back to what you said before, I mean, gotta be honest, we've heard some of this before, right? Like human beings are emotional. We make decisions with that part of our brain that I think you're applying, that you were talking about. Why is this so important for those of us that are in healthcare? Because I mean, in healthcare, you would think the logical side would be the one to appeal to because, it is all about your health and your
Yeah.
life and business and these kinds of things. Like, why is it so important that we listened to neuropsychology to say you need to appeal to the more base level part of the
Yeah.
brain?
Well, that's the biggest barrier. The biggest barrier to people is thinking like, oh, well, all I have to do is present logic. All I have to do is present facts and figures. And science is very data driven. And when you come out of health and science, you're thinking that the data will tell the story. We actually need to take a clue from a $600 billion US industry called entertainment, and specifically Hollywood. And Hollywood makes all that money because they're the emotion picture capital of the world. Every movie, I just paid $25 to see Hail Mary, a science fiction Ryan Gosling movie. Okay, why'd I pay 20? Why'd I laugh and cry and kiss $25 goodbye? Not to mention the popcorn and the soda. Okay, I did it to have an emotional experience. So that's what movies are. They get us to not only think about things, but they get us to shed a tear and feel noble um, and that is the experience we want. It's the same in business, and whether you're talking to a prospect or an employee. May I share a short story? We'll call this person Sam. So I'm speaking to CEO groups around the country, and here's Sam. Sam's got his arms folded and, kind of his teeth clenched as I'm speaking. And I said, oh, I got to stop this. Sam, let me ask you a question. Are you the chief operating officer? He said, well, yes, I am. I said, oh man, you must have wondered, like, why did they waste our time bringing this storyteller guy in? Well, yeah, I was thinking that. I said, oh, I get it. So, Sam, if you just want employees to do something, just tell them what to do. And Sam laughed, and everybody laughed. I said, oh, it's not that easy. Maybe sometimes you need to persuade them to do the right thing. So maybe you need to tell them a story about that part of your culture in action. I love it when I speak to these groups. They say, "Oh, we've got this all covered because we have core values." I asked one. I said, "Well, how many?" 22. We have 22 core values. They're on a poster in our staff room. And every staff meeting, we point to one of the core values, and everybody says the core value. You know, I don't know what the core value is. Most of them are the same, but they're something like the customer comes first. Um, you need to say it in that robotic voice, like my children would used to say, "Thank you for the dinner, Dad." You know, it's like, okay. So, yes, we put customers first. And then I would say, "Oh, well, give me a story where you put customers first." I said, "Well, that's not fair. There's 21 others here. Let's go. Give me any story for any of these core values." They had none. I said, "So human brains are hardwired for stories. We remember stories. We don't remember a list of 22 things on the wall, and it doesn't guide our behavior. But if I remembered a story where, oh, yeah, they put the customer first here, and that person got rewarded and promoted, good things happened. Oh, maybe I should put customers first." So that is the power of this.
Oh, okay. So is that predominantly, Henry, in your mind, how neuropsychology can help leaders? Like it really can help them persuade their teams and their organizations to move in the direction that they want them to?
Absolutely. I, I teach companies this all the time, but I start with their core values and then I mine, if you will, the stories out of them because they exist. So they're there, but we just have to bring them to the surface because many people, like the chief operating officer, didn't get there as a storyteller. So first, I got to show them the power of the stories, and this is it's science backed. For those who really want proof, I'll show them a 2008 cover story in Scientific American that has all the data and evidence and double blind studies that were done and how this motivates people. But most people they get it intuitively. This one study that was done out of Vanderbilt, they put two rooms and they filled them with same number of people, and one group was given all the facts and figures and the other group was just given a story. And guess which room was more persuaded? It was the one that got the story, and they could remember the story, they could tell the story to other people, and that is the real power there. One of my authors does political campaigns, not for candidates, but for issues. A new tax bond, or fighting something, or getting the a big arena approved in the city. And he said it really comes down to the narrative, to the stories, and controlling the narrative by controlling the stories that are out there. I worked with a consulting firm that consults with attorneys, usually general counsels at large corporations, and they're defending lawsuits all the time. And we said, "Well, you are already in a story when you enter that courtroom, and the story is David versus Goliath. And by the way, you're Goliath, and nobody roots for Goliath. They're rooting for David. They're rooting for the underdog. The other attorney has that built in. So you're going to need to have stories that counter that, and that the jury will leave. And when they're discussing it, it'll say, well, it was like that story he told about the lion that got out of the zoo." Now, usually I want people telling true stories, but sometimes you're going to tell an Aesop fable or something in the news that will make people remember.
So Henry, when I do this well, when I successfully practice neuropsychology or incorporate it into my day to day, what does that look like? Like, am I telling stories 24/7 here, or am I mixing it in? Am I doing this sort of active listening stuff that you were talking about before?
Yeah,
How does this manifest when I implement it?
right. Well, first there's a conversation, and you ask really good questions and you listen. I was in a one of my CEO workshops and we were on break and two CEOs were discussing it. And they said, "Oh man, what do you do when they come into you with these ideas? Coming in with ideas." And the other CEO said, "Well, here's what you do. You make eye contact, you pretend to listen to them. When they're done talking, you say, 'You've given me a lot to think about.' And then the next day you tell them you're not going to do it, you're going in this other direction." And I said, "Hey, I got an idea. what if you really listened to them and really evaluated their idea? Maybe it was a good idea and you should do it. They didn't like that so much. But that's what we have to do. We need to really listen. And that key where I say, ask the other people, like, well, what are the roadblocks? What's going to get in the way of this? Oh, another story. One of my psychologists that I helped write a book for, and he is like, um, well, how do I say it discreetly? He's an a-hole coach. Um, Companies hire him when they have an employee who's too painful to keep, but too valuable to let go. So
Okay.
it might be like a chief technology officer, chief medical officer, that CEO might be the board. And there was this one instance where he's brought in and the CEO says, okay, meet with my chief technology officer, Brian, meet with Brian. But I don't think this is going to work out. So we might need you to help exit Brian. Okay. So he goes, why? He goes, he is the most negative person I've ever met. He's on the C-suite team. And whenever I bring up an idea for an initiative, he brings up 10 ideas why it won't work. Okay. So Dr. Bruce meets with Brian and says, so Brian, how do you think you're viewed by the other members of the C-suite and the CEO? Oh, they think I'm one of the most valuable people that they've ever had at this company. He said, really? He goes, oh yeah. He says, why do you think they think that? He goes, well, the CEO comes up with lots of ideas. And immediately I think, okay, what are 10 things that we're going to have to overcome to make this work? And nobody else says anything, but I come up with a list. And then in the discussion, I say, let me give you 10 reasons why this won't work. He goes, oh, what if I told you they thought you were the most negative person and I'm your last resort here? If the coaching with me doesn't work out, you're going to be gone. He goes, I don't understand. He goes, here, just try this from now on. When the CEO comes up with the list, the idea, come up with your list in the meeting, but don't say anything in the meeting. When the meeting's over, go knock on his door and said, boss, I've been thinking about what you said. There are 10 things that we have to overcome for this to succeed. So can I give you the list of 10 things? And I have some ideas on what we do to do it. He says, I'll try it. 90 days, Dr. Bruce comes back and says, so should we, prepare the termination for Brian? CEO says, what are you talking about? He's the most valuable person I have here. Same guy, same ideas, but just presented different. So that's a story I tell to get people to understand that maybe you need to ask questions, maybe you need to get behind the why, maybe you need to understand more.
So first of all, I like that story. It's very illustrative.
Thank
How
you.
how do we deploy this, Henry, in a marketing perspective, like from a marketing standpoint? Is this as simple as, hey, you got to do this with your customers and understand their customers? I mean, that would be pretty pedantic, but I'm assuming that's one way. But are there other ways that we could successfully deploy this and use this as healthcare marketers?
Sure. So, I in Orange County, California, I spoke there a lot, but I would come in this one time, and this group was vice presidents, and there were a lot of vice presidents at agencies. And I started to introduce myself and my book, and a member of the audience, let's call him Jim, Jim says, you don't have to introduce yourself. I know all about you. I said, oh, you do? I said, what do you know? And he goes, you're the reason we had to rewrite every article on all our websites. I said, tell me more. He goes, well, we just had these information, probably now it'd be like AI content. Ugh. I said, he said they had to dig for a story that illustrated what was happening. And they said a lot more engagement on the website. All the measures and KPIs that we use show better engagement, better results from this process. So that's why I'm here to learn more about it today. Um, in a business development context, I will speak with agency leaders and agency owners and teach them that basic Four questions. There's four questions. One, what's your goal? Two, what are the assets? Three, what are the roadblocks? And four, would you like to hear a story about somebody who got from where you are to where you want to go? I said, now the hard work is you have to plan the stories in advance. You need a quiver of arrows of stories to tell. Um, you need to research them, test them. You need to practice them on people so that you can tell it in a couple of minutes and give them the moral of the story and they can see. And it makes you much more persuasive.
I gotta admit, Henry, listening to you, I mean, stories, at least in this business context, sound suspiciously like case studies. Um,
Oh, I'm sorry. You just said a really boring word. Case study. Here's a case study. Oh my gosh. So that's why I say get the butts out of your mouth, get the case studies out of your mouth. Don't say that word. Say, can I tell you a story? And we bring people back in time, where story was a treat, where you were told a story. Um, if if they're worried, say, can I tell you a brief story? Can I tell you a 2-minute story? A lot of times when I call people up, like a cold call, I start off with saying, is this a bad time for a 1-minute conversation? Because I learned if it is a bad time and they say it's a bad time, you don't want to talk to that person. Most people will say, it's always a bad time, Colin. What's on your mind? I got 2 minutes for you. Go. And then we had a little agreement. And then I'm going to tell something. Now, a story, I also asked for permission to tell a story. If you notice, the fourth thing is, may I tell you a story about somebody who was in your position and wanted to go where you want to go? Well, yes, I want to hear that, um, because people can glean information out of the story and it helps them. That works with prospects. It works with employees and building a culture and getting them to follow core values. It works with investors. Uh, it works with forming relationships, business partners, and knowing a story that has what's in it for them. I won't do the cliche, the radio station, WIFFM, but what's in it for me? That's what people want to know. And so you need to phrase things that way. And I don't think persuasion is a bad word. I don't think it's manipulation. I think you're persuading somebody to do something that's in their best interest. Sometimes you're helping them make a new decision based on new information. That's also, I stole that from Dale Carnegie and I use it all the time. I'll say, "Well, would, would you be willing to consider a new decision based on new information?" That's so much different than people say, would you be willing to change your mind? Can I change your mind on this? It's like, are you still not wanting to buy that ad? It's like, what's that? Do you still not want to go to the prom with me? No. Um, I'm not supposed to use dating analogies. HR hates it when I use dating analogies, but
so,
they work.
but to go back to something you said before, Henry, like how do I tell a story, or what elements do I need to include in my story to appeal to
Oh,
that base brain that we talked about at the beginning to take advantage of neuropsychology?
3 characters are in every story. There's a hero or protagonist, somebody who wants something. You are not the hero of your stories. I get a lot of pushback on this. We did great things. Oh, you're in the story, but you're not the hero. Um, the, the 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 main character, the hero of your story, should be somebody like the person you're trying to persuade. So if you're trying to persuade a client, it's a client like them, and you make them uh, likable, and you make them the victim of undeserved misfortune, because we root for people who are the victims of undeserved misfortune. Um, if the problem is something we created, we're not a real sympathetic character because you want them to root for this character. And then there is a nemesis. It could be a person, but it also could be Obamacare. It could be the recession of 2008. It could be the war in Iran. It could be any number of things that is causing a problem. The chaos, the chaotic business conditions of 2026. That can be a nemesis. Oh, IRS regulations. There we go. April 15th. I'm sorry, you're April 1st for you up in Canada, April 15th for us. Um, I always say the taxes we pay are the price of freedom. And if you don't believe me, ask people like Wesley Snipes, Al Capone, Richard Hatch. Well, Willie Nelson, they didn't actually put in prison, but they put an IRS agent on the tour bus with him. And he went directly to the box office to siphon off the cash to get it so Willie could keep earning money and pay Uncle Sam. So, anyway, any of those could be the nemesis problem. You're the mentor character in the story. Three characters: hero, nemesis, mentor. You're the voice of wisdom and experience. You gave people advice, knowledge, and they succeeded. They went from mess to success because they followed your advice. All that in 2 minutes. And people see you as the problem solver, as the person who helps people get what they want.
I like how you're saying that the nemesis does not have to be a person because oftentimes it's not, especially when
Yeah,
it comes to healthcare marketing. It's circumstance, it's policies, it's procedures, it's the environment that we
sure.
operate in, right?
Right. And then also that nemesis can lead into the being a victim of undeserved misfortune. You know, it wasn't your fault that they changed uh, the account, the big, beautiful tax bill changed the rules you were playing under. Um, but there you go. There's a nemesis and an undeserved misfortune that people can relate to.
So you mentioned at the beginning, Henry, about the biggest barrier to neuropsychology is the fact that it's not that people don't believe in neuropsychology because they believe that facts and figures are the route to getting to motivating people to take an action or to call up for a demo or to come in for an appointment. Is that the biggest barrier? Truly, is that we believe otherwise, even though the science says that's not how things work?
Well, fear never sleeps. We're always afraid. We're afraid to tell stories. That's some of the fear. We feel more comfortable with just giving data, giving lots of data. And then you can say, well, I did all I could. I gave them all the data. Um, Even though neuroscience is the revolution in it 15 years ago was we didn't need to slice brains open to see how they worked. We were able to use the same thing we use to treat people and scan diseases. We could use to see how the brain would work, and that's where we knew where facts and figures were just sort of up in this part of the brain, and stories got to this part of the brain where decisions were made. So it's science backed. Um, it's not weird science. It's real science that backs this up, and it's being applied in leadership. It's being applied in marketing. It's being applied in other areas. So and it's not like it was new yesterday. This is 15 years that this has been around. I mentioned the 2008 article in Scientific American, Why We Love Tales. And they used anecdotal evidence, but then they backed it up with the science because it's not called Anecdotal Evidence America, it's Science America. And so if you can get on the program with that, and then also you're going to have to learn some new skills. And um, now I have a free website, persuadewithastory.com, has videos, has articles and information. I've published books on this. The information is out there. You can get this and access it pretty easy. You just have to make an effort.
So, final question for you, Henry. If I was a person inside an organization, whether that's a provider or a health IT company or a payer or even in the government, and I was convinced of neuropsychology and I wanted to adopt it or adopt its principles, tell more stories in my organization, but maybe I'm running into some resistance from leadership. How would you recommend I overcome it?
Well, I go back to Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. You ask them to make a new decision based on new information. And the new information is all this evidence that are in my books or on my website. about neuropsychology and show them about it in action. And I'm not the only person writing about this. It's coming from all different angles. There's just a confluence of information on this that's out there. And when I speak to CEOs, especially those ones with their arms folded and all that, I just tell them, I'm just giving you another tool in the tool chest. And the old thing about if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem's a nail. I had another example in California. Um, the medical board had to remove a doctor because no matter what somebody came in for, back surgery. They got back surgery. It was back surgery because he was a back surgeon, but he's not a back surgeon anymore.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, Henry, you've already mentioned it once, but how can people connect with you? Where's the best place they can go to learn more about you?
Sure. So, two places. One is my website, persuadewithastory.com, and that has a lot of information on this and videos and information. And then also Indie Books International. That's my company, INDIE, books plural, INTL.com. And that's where we help people with books that persuade with stories.
Awesome. Well, Henry, it's always a pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you so much for sharing all this great information about neuropsychology today.
Colin, as they say at Chick-fil-A, my pleasure.
All right, Henry, this is great. And we'll talk to you again soon. We'll have you back on the program, I'm sure.
Thanks.
Hey, I really want to thank Henry for joining me on camera. It's clear that he really, really believes in the power of stories. And it's through stories that we appeal to the decision-making part of our brains. I loved his example of telling 2-minute stories. And I also loved his reaction when I compared stories to case studies. Hey, if you made it this far in the video, we would really appreciate it if you mash that like button and click subscribe. Also, head on over to Swaay Health, that's Swaay with 2 A's, .health, where you will find more great content like this. I'm Colin Hung. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.